Here he is, one half of the Rink-Wide Duo with Andrew Wadden, Canucks reporter. They were busy last night after a 5-4 overtime win in Dallas against the Stars. The one and only Jeff Paterson. Jeff, good afternoon.
Hi there. Yeah, let me answer the poll question. Thatcher Demko, certainly he was back. I mean, I saw him with my own two eyes, or at least on my TV screen. I think I need a little bit more of a body of work. But you know, when I thought, all right, like, he looks good and ready to go. First shift of the second period, when Pavelski tried the wraparound and he had to go from his left to his right, fully extended, and it was his right side that was injured in that game against Florida back on December the 1st. When he popped up from that and carried on, I thought, okay. Like, I honestly, in that moment, I was worried because that's exactly, I think, the kind of movement and motion that could have re-aggravated whatever it was, and we think it was his groin, that kept him out for 3 months. So when he popped up from that and carried on, I made a great save on Jason Robertson in the third period at 4-4 when Robertson got in behind the defense. And by the way, that was sort of a theme of the night. The Stars getting in behind the Canuck defense. Yeah. I don't know. This is Thatcher Demko coming back. Maybe you want to cut down on the number of breakaways the guy has to face. And, of course, Jamie Benn scored on one, and Rupe Hintz wasn't necessarily a breakaway, but attacked with speed on the power play. So Stars were coming at Thatcher Demko in waves, but, boy, he looked up to the test. And I am going to be curious now, 22 games to go. What is his workload going to be? Can this organization resist the urge to just run him out there every night trying to make up for lost time?
Well, of course, they were missing Riley Stillman on the blue line, perhaps accounting for some of those breakaways.
Well, that blue line was we don't go away from the blue line. Don't go away from that blue line. I mean, we've attacked the form of the blue line before. Man, the resume of the blue line last night with the trade of Stillman. Not that Stillman has an elongated resume himself, but man, that was quite a group of six there, Jeff.
Yeah, well, half of it. Three of the guys, Landon Breesbaugh and Noah Juleson, like straight out of Abbotsford, in the last couple of weeks. And then all they do right now is lean on Quinn Hughes, and yet he seems to be playing some of his best hockey in a long time, and that's saying something. He's up to this challenge of just taking on the workload, twice over 30 minutes last week out on the road trip. And, of course, overtime didn't last long enough, but had it gone the duration, he might have been another 30 minutes in that game against the Stars, but he's in on 3 of the goals, so 3 assist night for Quinn Hughes. He wasn't on the ice for any of the goals against. Quinn Hughes digging in and doing a nice job. And so patchwork doesn't even begin to describe it. It's funny, and this is kind of getting away from the defense a little bit, but Tyler Myers is the oldest player they had in uniform last night at 33. Sheldon Dries was the second oldest player in the Canuck lineup last night at 28. So absolutely, it's a youth movement. It has to be just because of the injuries that they've endured here. 8 guys on the injured list, and then JT Miller obviously hasn't joined the official IR yet. And then Luke Shen is just in limbo. And so the Canucks had no business winning that hockey game, and the Dallas Stars have to be kicking themselves. Every point matters to them. They're right there knocking on the door of the conference lead, and yet they're not guaranteed a playoff spot either. It is so stacked in that Western Conference right now that you keep leaving these points on the table, and the Stars have 3 wins in their last dozen games, but a lot of them have gone to overtime. And so they've managed to pick up a single point, but they have to be kicking themselves. There was no reason that lineup of Vancouver Canucks should beat the Dallas Stars, except that Thatcher Demko, back in uniform and back in the groove last night. He did look good.
Jeff, before we leave Thatcher Demko, first of all, we thought maybe he'd back up last night. Seemed like it was a little early to have him start. Then his comments after the game I found interesting, where he talked about it was a crazy day and then referenced getting the start to the bubble as though it was some sort of scramble. And he said it took his everything. Pretty dramatic stuff, pretty extra words from Thatcher Demko. To what do you attribute, and were you a little surprised to see him get the nod last night?
Yeah, I mean, the comments are curious. That does make you think that maybe there was an initial decision to have him be the backup, and then something changed. And, I don't know, I wasn't there on the scene, obviously, and unfortunately, very few media were. And so it's hard to sort of get get down to the truth and get the backstory there. I took his comments about the bubble more about being a guy that had been on the sideline, basically watching although he was the backup and was in uniform in the bubble, but, getting thrust into action after a fairly long layoff. And I guess in terms of the layoff, I think that the season stopped in March and then picked up again in the summer. So that was more where I was going. But the idea that it was a crazy day, I mean, it seemed like a pretty routine day by, observer standards. They had a morning skate and then game time at normal time. It was a crazy weekend in as much as, they played Boston on Saturday. Sunday is an all-day travel day down to Dallas, and then you have to get ready to play. But, hopefully we get an opportunity to sort of dig a little deeper with Thatcher to get us maybe more of the story there. Whatever the case, as crazy as the day may have been in his mind, he looked pretty settled. And outside of the Jamie Benn shorthanded breakaway, I thought with that patchwork group in front of him, the first period was about ideal for him to sort of ease his way back in. Boston had 20 first-period shots the other night on Artur Silovs. Now, the Stars ended up with 20 second-period shots, but at least he got 20 minutes where I thought he could, and I don't want to say ease because it's the NHL and you're facing NHL shooters, but he wasn't under siege, certainly. So I thought those opening 20 minutes were sort of a nice re-entry to the National Hockey League for a guy who had been off for 3 months.
Before we go leave Thatcher Demko again, just report in The Athletic, Shayna Goldman, that the Canucks are working on something big. Demko comes back a little bit early, declares himself healthy in the post game. We had heard that the LA Kings were looking at Demko and maybe would have to wait till the summer. Is there any piece of you that believes that Thatcher Demko could be moved between now and Friday?
That was a show me game? That was a show me game.
Well, I'm putting it out there, connecting dots. I don't necessarily believe it. I'm just wondering if that's a possibility that anyone is willing to give credence to.
Yeah, for the longest time, and Andrew and I kicked this around on Rinkwide the other day, and I want to sort of be consistent in my response. I didn't think it was a possibility, but the fact that he's back now and could play Thursday as well is another show-me game, and then there's time up until the noon deadline on Friday. I mean, I guess I can't rule it out entirely. That the Kings have been a team that, have been linked there for a while. But now I'm seeing again that the Pittsburgh Penguins are sort of surfacing, and Tristan Jarry is an unrestricted free agent at the end of the season, and things haven't been going particularly well for the Penguins of late. And, you got Crosby and Malkin and Letang that you're up to. Like, do you owe it to them to go and find a goaltender that maybe, could put that team on his back? So, it kind of feels in the same breath that Patrick Allvin's starting to flex his trade muscles that, small deals, but lubricating the wheel at the very least. So you put it all together, and who knows what we're in for over these next 72 or 96 hours as we work our way to that deadline. But yeah, I mean, outside of Hughes and Pettersson right now, I can't imagine that there is anybody that is truly untouchable. And I do think as the Vancouver Canucks start to, it feels like they are piece by piece, or in Alvin's own words, brick by brick, starting to enact a little bit of their plan that, I don't think I can sit here and rule it out entirely.
The skilled players really ruining things for the Canucks in the draft lottery standings, however, in particular that Kuzmenko fellow who has a flair for the dramatic, doesn't he, in tying games and winning games late, but Beauvillier's been very good. Hughes has been very good, as you mentioned earlier, obviously Pettersson as well, and hey, if they start to get some contributions from the true kids, Ratu and Podkolzin, like they did on that one play, it'll be tougher to lose games down the stretch and improve your draft status.
Yeah, and I think I said this to you last week when Kuzmenko scored the 2 late goals in Nashville and St. Louis. For those that are invested in the Canuck players and seeing Canuck players do their thing, it's a shame, and now you had last night, that none of these have happened at home, where the Canucks just haven't been very good. But, the celebrations are something, and we know that Kuzmenko loves to score goals, and so late goals against the Predators and the Blues, and then the overtime winner, there would have been a massive celebration on the part of Kuzmenko, and I think some people would have had some fun with that had it happened in front of the home fans. But they keep doing this out on the road and not so much at home. We'll see what happens on Thursday against the Minnesota Wild. Elias Pettersson is kind of funny. I mean, his line mates each had 3-point nights, and he only has 1, but he was busy blocking shots, a career-high 6 blocked shots for Elias Pettersson. So if people are wondering, is he fully invested? I would think last night was a pretty good example of that. And, yeah, I mean, the young kids love the play by Podkolzin to take that pass in flight and walk around Dellandrea and then snap it home. As for Ratu, that was pretty much it for his night. He played less than 2 minutes over the final 40 minutes of the hockey game. He was the guy that Dodonov just blew by right up the middle on his goal, and I think the coaches certainly took note of that. But again, how do you make an honest assessment of this guy at the National Hockey League level if he's going to play 4 minutes? So, Thursday's another night, but they are leaning on their top-end guys, and if they're going to do that, then there's a chance that those top-end guys are going to win you some hockey games, and I guess they're just going to have to be prepared to live with that.
2 questions by way of follow-up. Pettersson's third in the league for shot blocks from forwards at 71. Do we want that? And then secondly, as you say with Ratu, if he's going to play that little, Jeff, is he better served in Abbotsford right now, or do they just need the bodies at center ice at the NHL level?
Yeah, well, I think you get through Thursday night and then the deadline, and let's see who's here and what that looks like, and maybe at that point, more of an update on JT Miller, who went from a trade chip to out a week to week, in the words of the hockey club. And when I see week to week, I just think back to Thatcher Demko, who was supposed to be 6 weeks, and then it turned into 12, or Tanner Pearson, who was supposed to be a couple of weeks, and we may never see him again. So I do take any Canuck timeline with a grain of salt, especially in a week like this one where you just don't know what they're doing as far as things behind the scenes. So I wouldn't expect that JT Miller is going to be available on Thursday night. So Ratu probably sticks around then, but maybe it's time at that point to bring up one of the other younger guys, whether it's Linus Karlsson or somebody else from Abbotsford, if Ratu's only going to play. And the other thing is, he didn't get the call up on merit necessarily because, by his own admission, it hadn't been going particularly well down in Abbotsford. So, whatever the case, we've seen this now with Rick Tocchet that, whether it's young players or players arriving sight on scene, or Jack Studnicka, who was ill and then missed, I think, 6 games, it takes a while for Rick Tocchet to warm to these guys. And so the spin-off of that is that the top-end guys end up playing an awful lot, and I think in the eyes of many, too much. But there's so much skill there in Paterson and Kuzmenko, and as you said, Beauvillier has fit in beautifully, and he got the plum assignment of playing on the wing with Elias Pettersson, but he's responded there, and good for him, because when the Canucks acquired him, he was ice cold, and the Islanders weren't scoring much, and he's come to a team now that does score some goals, and he's been a part of that, and I loved both of his goals last night, the half volley on the opener, and then the second one, he roofed it. He got his spot and found the top of the net there. So a couple of nice goal-scorer goals from Anthony Beauvillier. But, I'm kind of curious because, I wanted to see Kravtsov as well last night in his debut. And this is a guy that flew all day Sunday to get to Dallas. Hadn't played for the Rangers since February 10th. So he played 1 game in the NHL in the last month. I had pretty low expectations, and he kind of met them. There just wasn't a whole lot there, but I'm not going to hold that against him and write the book on Vitaly Kravtsov on 1 game. Early in the third period, had a couple of opportunities. He got some power play time, but didn't do a whole lot with it. So, pretty incomplete, I think, for his first night, but if this is going to be part of the evaluation process, then I want to see these guys so that we can dig a little deeper and make more of an evaluation.
Still alive mathematically. You got to press. You got to ride those veterans. One small little, feel-good story is at the age of 28 and the second oldest player on the ice last night, has Sheldon Dries become a National Hockey League player somewhere for next year with a 9-goal? He could ostensibly have an 11, 12-goal season on his hands here the rest of the way. Doesn't that earn you a National Hockey League job somewhere?
Yeah, and it very well may be right here in Vancouver. He's under contract for 1 more year at $762,000. There are 5 guys in the NHL this season making league minimum who have scored more goals than Sheldon Dries. So, in a league where the middle class is being eradicated on a daily basis, you need some of those guys that don't take up much of a bite on the salary cap that are productive. And so, it's 9 goals, but it's 9 goals in 40 games because he hasn't played every game. And in his parts of 2 seasons with the Vancouver Canucks now, it is 11 goals in 52 games. So that would put him on a pace for, sort of 17 or 18 over the course of a full season, which he's not going to be able to play this year. But this is who he is. He's a depth guy who has shown he can light up the American Hockey League, but when he gets his opportunities, not the biggest guy in the world, but, nice deflection last night, the goal in Nashville last week, stuck with it, whistle didn't go, and the puck was loose behind UC Saros. And the other thing, when I think of Sheldon Dries, and I just look at, his production, this is sort of mind-boggling now that Bo Horvat has been shipped away. On the active roster, Andrei Kuzmenko and JT Miller are the only guys with more power play goals than Sheldon Dries, who has 4, which is twice as many as Elias Pettersson has on the season.
That's a great trivia bit. That is a good trivia.
Somebody make some sense of that, because the second unit hasn't been terribly productive, doesn't get a lot of opportunity, obviously, but this is a guy that, he's got a little bit of a nose for the net. So, I think whether it's here in Vancouver or some other team sees the value of a guy at league minimum that can chip in with some offense. I kind of liken him to a little bit of Sam Gagner later in his career, where Gagner could be a fourth-line guy, but also had utility as a power play guy. And Sam Gagner is still going strong because I think of his attitude. He's a good teammate. He just loves being in the National Hockey League. And I think for Sheldon Dries, he doesn't have the pedigree. Obviously, Sam Gagner was a high draft pick and all those things. But I'm just saying there is in today's NHL where the tough guy essentially doesn't exist anymore. The fourth line is now populated by guys that have to be specialists. And if Sheldon Dries' specialty is providing a boost of offense, being able to play a little higher in the lineup when called upon, but also chipping in on the power play, then I think there probably is a spot in the NHL for Sheldon Dries. Again, at the age of 28, his best may still be ahead of him.
Jeff, Beauvillier has outproduced Bo Horvat since the Islanders trade. Is he a keeper now? I know we all talked about maybe they move him on because he's a little bit older. He's, one more year left on the contract after this one at 4.15, which, let's face it, which is an at-market value contract, if that, when they acquired him. But he's made quite an impression. He's played really well. Give him credit. Is he a keeper, do you think, for them going forward?
Well, I don't see them moving him before this deadline, and so I still think, and who knows what the crystal ball would tell you, but at this time next year, I think he could be a trade chip. But if he does become a permanent winger for Elias Pettersson, then it stands to reason that he is going to produce. And if you're playing with Pettersson, you better produce. And he's done that. And you're right, point-a-game guy. Now, I think we're going to do this. It's human nature, the comparison every time either one of them scores, it's Bo against Bo. But, the Islanders are an offensively challenged team, and as they work closer to the playoffs, I think they're going to tighten it up. And so Bo Horvat may not have the opportunity to score as much as he did here in Vancouver, where obviously things are a little bit looser. And Beauvillier probably feels like he's got a bit of a new lease on life for a lot of those same reasons, that it wasn't happening for him in the Island. And they just, as a team, weren't scoring much before that trade, and that's why they felt the need to make the big splash. They thought Horvat could come in and help their power play, which was struggling, and help them at even strength. And now that Barzal's out for a little bit, they need Bo Horvat to be the player that he can be. But for Beauvillier, it's just been it feels like it's been a pretty seamless fit with Paterson. We've seen him use the hand-eye a couple of times, nice deflections. Last night, again, looked like a goal scorer, picking his spots. So, keeper long-term, I'm not sure that I go that far, but you're right. What looked like a bit of a throw-in and just to make the books balance in the trade, he's looking the part of a 20 to 25 goal kind of scorer in the short time that he's been a Canuck. And at $4 million, that's not an overpayment. So I think that's a contract that he probably could extract a little bit of value out of next year and maybe boost his value and then pull the trigger on a trade at the deadline. So let's see where it goes. But so far, I think he has to be pretty happy with the soft landing spot alongside Elias Pettersson, and Pettersson and his line mates, they're getting the job done.
Marvelous stuff, Jeff. Busy week. We'll catch up with you again tomorrow and then again on trade deadline on Friday. Thank you for this.